first seat, yeah. Or second seat, I guess. Thank you. Second, I'd like to invite the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Planning from Colombia, Ms. Jennifer Mojica Flores. And then the First Deputy Minister of Justice of Georgia, Ms. Tamar Keshelashvili. And finally, from Sierra Leone, we have the Minister of Lands, Housing, and Country Planning, Mr. Turad Senesi. So, in my role as CEO of Landesa, I spend a lot of time trying to pitch the importance of land, but I realize we don't need to do that here. Everybody knows land matters. But at Landesa, we've been doing this for almost 50 years, and clearly, that message is not reaching the world. Progress has been halting at best. And I guess we have to ask ourselves, why is that? What are the challenges that are getting in our way? Is it political? Is it resources? Is it capacity? Is it the culture? Is it technology? And why do we see certain successes happening in certain places around the world? What motivates governments to step up? And what have been some of their success factors? Those are the issues that we're going to try to look at today. And I'm going to start, I guess I'll sit down. So my biggest challenge today will be trying to get this all done in the 60 minutes allotted, because each one of these panelists could give a master class in land rights, I have no doubt about it. But we're going to ask them to try to limit their responses to 3 to 4 minutes. I know I'm going to have some help with a flashing card somewhere. And then that should leave us with time afterwards for a little bit of Q&A. So, starting to my left, Minister Yudhoyono. Quick background, you were appointed this year as Minister of Agrarian Affairs and Spatial Planning. You're also the General Chair of the Democratic Party in Indonesia, and you founded the Yudhoyono Institute, which is a think tank on democracy and prosperity. And of course, you have many other accomplishments, but we'll keep it to that for the moment. So recently, we know at Landesa that there's been tremendous progress in Indonesia, where we've started doing some work. And over 100 million parcels of land have now been mapped and registered, which is a remarkable accomplishment. I understand that another 26 million parcels will be registered in the coming year or so. And so I guess the question to you is, what's motivated this sudden movement around land, and what are some of the challenges that you've faced? And I want to just make clear, we're going to have 2 rounds of questions. So we'll start with the motives and challenges, and then we'll get to some of the success factors. So please.
Thank you, Chris. But before I answer your question, on behalf of the government of Indonesia, allow me to express our sincere gratitude for this invitation to this conference, and thank you for your continuous support to make Indonesian agrarian reform a great success. And we are grateful for your help to our communities impacted by natural disaster. So World Bank has indeed made a significant contribution to our systematic land registration program, which is fundamental for 3 main reasons. First one, this program provides legal certainty for landowners. The primary agrarian problem in Indonesia is the minimum ownership of land titles. So when, at my first day as minister, I flew to Manado, North Sulawesi. It's 3 hours flight from Jakarta. And I met this 80-year-old lady. Her name is Miss Adela. And she has been living in her house for half of her life, but never possessed any legal documentation until I gave her in person a certificate of land titles. She smiled in joy and relief, probably because this is the first time ever, after so many years, that she has something to be given to her next generation. So millions of Indonesians and citizens share a similar story with Miss Adela. And in East Java, there are thousands of farmers. So last week we gave and distributed 10,000 land certificates to those 3 generations of farmers. Never had any land certificates before. And in Indonesia, of course, most cases, land ownership is hereditary. So for decades, this de facto form of ownership is considered adequate for many societies. Of course, this kind of mindset has led to many problems and conflicts, especially when landowners dies or there's a ownership changes hands, because land can be claimed and repossessed by other parties at any time. So to provide legal certainty, since 2017, President Joko Widodo has implemented Indonesia's systematic land registration program, which is directed towards promotion of justice and prosperity for all. And the second point, the land registration provides access to the economy. Indonesia has more than 65 million small medium enterprises, absorbing 97% of our workforce and contributing 61% to our GDP. So they are the backbone of our economy. The problem is they have a very limited access to capital. So when they possess land titles, they could actually and legally apply for soft loans from our banking system and other financial institutions. And in the end, of course, it will generate significant economic value added. And the third one, land registration also provides legal protection from the unlawful, unethical land grabbers, or more popular in Indonesia, we call it as land mafia. So last year alone, our anti-land mafia task force, which is a collaboration between our ministry and the law enforcement agency, we could decisively prevent over $800 million of potential loss from land-related crimes. But despite all these benefits, many remain reluctant to register their land because they don't want to bother with administrative matters and are concerned with the obligation to pay taxes. So first and foremost, we must change the mindset of the people so they could understand clearly the benefits of having land titles and the risk of not having one through socialization campaign effectively. And further, the systematic land registration invites community participation and also collaboration from private elements. This is very important because government has very limited resources, both in terms of human resources and technological resources. So for their part, our local governments are also encouraged to provide incentive policies. For example, by waiving the first registration tax. And this proved to be effective to drive people to register their lands. So in short, key to success in this endeavor is the cross-sectoral approach, which allows the synergy and collaboration among stakeholders. And one last point, Chris, the results are quite exceptional because in 2017, only 46 million land parcels have been registered. But today, currently, we have registered more than 112 million land parcels out of 126 million in total target. Meaning, over the last 7 years, there has been an increase of almost 250%. So, this is a very optimistic scenario, and hopefully by the end of 2025, we can achieve our target. Well, the statistics are nice, but again, this is about promotion of justice and prosperity for all Indonesian landowners. So I strongly believe that this systematic land registration program will bring about a better future for everyone in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Inspiring and full. In just a few minutes, you've given us such a good overview of some of the key factors and where you're headed with it. We'll come back to that. Now I want to talk to Minister Jennifer Mojica Flores. So you are the Colombian Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. Before that, you were Director of Ethnic Affairs of Colombia's Land Restitution Unit. And before that, you were the Deputy Director of an organization that I know well because I worked there once, the Colombian Commission of Jurists. We know that in Colombia, there's been something like 50 years of conflict, and much of that has revolved around land. And recently, you had the peace accords that the government is now responsible for implementing. Maybe you can help us understand how big a role does land play in all of that, and what are some of the challenges that you're facing?
Bueno, muy buenas tardes. Un saludo muy especial al Banco Mundial, que siempre nos acompaña en estas políticas públicas que buscan transformaciones de la dimensión que compartimos. Efectivamente, la reforma agraria que el gobierno de Colombia y particularmente el gobierno del presidente Gustavo Petro busca es una reforma agraria para la redistribución de las tierras que repare a las víctimas del conflicto armado. Y esto pues es una reforma agraria sui generis en el mundo, porque no solamente implica la compra y distribución de tierras, sino también implica la necesidad de reparar a las víctimas del conflicto armado. Y en Colombia 10 millones de hectáreas fueron despojadas a sangre y fuego a las víctimas de la violencia colombiana. Me dicen aquí que todos necesitan traductor.
Todo bien.
Entonces, estaba explicando, entonces es no solamente comprar tierra y repartir tierra, sino reparar a las víctimas del despojo de tierras, y además en un contexto donde todavía estamos en conflicto armado, en un contexto donde también implica la reconciliación con la naturaleza, porque gran parte de estas tierras que queremos reformar están en territorios estratégicos ambientales. Nosotros tenemos un tercio de nuestro territorio nacional en áreas protegidas entre el bioma amazónico, porque lo compartimos a la Amazonía, está en zonas de páramos, está en zonas de ciénagas y sabanas inundables, está en un conflicto de uso de la tierra y de acción climática que necesita ser también resuelto. Y esa es la apuesta que tenemos, además de cumplir un acuerdo de paz que se hizo con los grupos armados ilegales en 2016 y que había trazado un panorama de acción en el que lamentablemente no habíamos podido avanzar muy bien. Nuestra meta es poder llegar a cumplir al menos la mitad del acuerdo de paz con los grupos armados ilegales de 2016, que es llegar a 1,5 millones de hectáreas compradas en reforma agraria. Adoptamos un modelo de reforma de la paz y de la reconciliación. Adoptamos el modelo de Corea del Sur, en la medida en que compramos tierra voluntariamente y se paga al precio del avalúo comercial para no entrar en choques y contradicciones, en la medida en que necesitamos con esto gestar paz y no generar más conflicto, por ejemplo, a partir de modelos expropiatorios. Nosotros decidimos por voluntad política hacer una reforma agraria voluntaria, pero además implica todas las actividades junto con la tierra necesarias para la transformación de los territorios. No solamente es entregar tierra y repartirla entre poblaciones campesinas, negras o indígenas, o víctimas del conflicto, sino además hacer todo el proceso de acompañamiento para la reactivación económica y productiva. También queremos que esa producción hoy esté acorde con las acciones climáticas, que sea una producción adaptada al cambio climático, que sea una producción descarbonizada, que apueste por la agricultura familiar campesina, por prácticas de agroecología, por el aprovechamiento sostenible de los ecosistemas, y que además agregue valor y transforme las economías de esos territorios. Los territorios de la guerra, que son los de la reforma agraria, son territorios donde la exclusión y la pobreza es multidimensional, donde no ha llegado el desarrollo de infraestructuras públicas o sociales, en donde la desigualdad, por ejemplo, de poblaciones de mujeres es intolerable en este momento, en donde la pobreza en materia de seguridad alimentaria también afecta casi a la mitad de la población. Esa es la reforma que queremos. Tenemos una apuesta que además busca hacer una inversión nunca antes vista en los presupuestos que históricamente ha invertido el gobierno colombiano. Por ejemplo, entre el año pasado y este se han destinado 1.700 millones de dólares para compras de tierras voluntarias, con el ánimo de poder, a través de esta reforma agraria, cambiarla y transformar las situaciones de conflicto armado del país.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.